Welcome to RTI Training. My name is Vincent Bova. Today we're diving into one of the most impactful programming tools inside Integration Designer, event-based programming. We're going to break down what events are, when to use them, and how they can create a really appealing experience for any client. Now let's talk about what events are. An event in Integration Designer is a trigger that can execute instructions when a specific condition is met. In simpler terms, events tell the processor, hey, when this happens, do this. So an event can trigger when a gate opens or a doorbell rings, a specific time of day or night occurs, a timer expires, maybe a music streamer starts playing or stops playing, and many others. And these routines could be created on a button, or you could just create it on the processor. Okay, so they don't have to exist on buttons. Okay, now there's two types of events that you can run. You can run something called a processor event, and there's also driver events. We're going to focus on processor events for now. Now, we're going to click on the processor in our project, and then we're going to click on events. Here you're going to see the event management screen. Kind of resembles a spreadsheet, all different columns. This is where you can maintain all your processor events. And if I click Add New Event, you're going to see the 4 types of processor events available. Now, the processor has special features built into it, and you could leverage those features to perform those events. For example, our processor has 3 sense inputs. So those sense inputs can be run to a contact closure and can be used to detect voltage. And if that voltage detects a current, 12-volt current or less, anything over 3 to 5 volts, it will go high and we can trigger an event. So sense inputs, okay? There's also multi-purpose I/O ports in the processor. We know them as our emitter ports, but you could also use them for a CM232 module, that's an RS232 one-way module, or a VPS1 voltage sensor. You could do creative things with those, like splice them into TV USB ports, and if that TV doesn't have discrete power on and off, you could run it into that USB, and when that TV is on, that USB will send out voltage. And when it's off, most TVs will turn off their USBs, and therefore you'll be able to determine the voltage state of that USB. So you can use MPIO ports to detect voltage as well. Okay? We also have a built-in astronomical clock, and you could run events at a certain time of day or X amount of minutes before or after sunrise or sunset. There is also, because the processor knows time, it knows whether 10 minutes has gone by or 15 seconds, okay? Also, the processor knows when it just completed a startup, whether you synchronized it or whether it's recovering from a power outage or something like that. So let's start with Sense Event. Let's click Add Sense Event. And now our Sense Event details comes up. The first thing you want to do with a sense event is pick which port that you want to detect voltage from. Now, again, the XP6S has 3 sense inputs, 6 multi-purpose I/O ports. We're going to be using our sense input. And I ran my sense input to my gate. Now, since my gate has on and off terminals, right? Special open or closed terminals, kind of like a garage door opener, that thing sends out voltage when it's open, and it will stop sending out voltage when it's closed. And because of that, I could run a sense input to those terminals, each one, and determine whether my gate is open or closed, okay? Sometimes it could be 1 terminal or 2 terminals, 2 separate terminals. So you might have sense 1, gate status open or on, and then terminal 2 can be, or sense input 2 can go run to this closed terminal, okay? It's up to you, okay? It's up to the situation. But in my case, my gate sends out 12 volts when it's active. Now, what if my gate didn't send out 12 volts? You could, with sense inputs, provide your own power supply, your own 12-volt power supply. And what you do is you piggyback the signal on the sensory run, and you could basically, when the circuit's completed with the contact closure, with the dry contact, the voltage that you're supplying will start sending. So either or is fine. You could supply your own voltage if there isn't any. Okay? Now, in our case, the gate does supply voltage, so I'm going to select the gate status sense input. And you could name these in the port settings for your processor. Now, when a sense event triggers, there's two main functions. It could go high or it can go low. Going high means that it detects voltage. Okay? The gate opens, it sends a 12-volt trigger to the sense input. Now it goes high. Okay? When the gate closes, well, now that voltage is no longer present and it will go low. Okay? Gate closes, 0 volts, low. Okay? It could be anywhere below 3 volts. Okay? All right. So what we're going to do is trigger an event when that sense input goes high. Now, what do we want to do when that gate opens? Well, we could do a million different things, but what I want to do in the least on my install is on my keypad or whatever I have going on, I want to trigger a pop-up to come up, okay? Now, I could run a macro on the bottom here from any button, so I could select the room that it's in, I could select a source, and I could select one of the macros on that source. Okay, so if I select Sonos, I could select one of the macros on the Sonos, or I can create that macro myself manually on the processor if it's not on a button. So I'm going to leave these all as is, and I'm going to click OK, just save that as is. And now I'm going to go create my macro that I want to run off that event on the processor instead of on a button. Okay, so I'm going to click on the global area. Why global? Well, it's for a gate, and a gate isn't really specific to a room or a source, so it's a global function in the residence or business. So I'm going to go into the global area, and I'm going to click on macro list, okay? And I'm going to click on this little white piece of paper which says add a new macro. If you read the text, it says add a new system macro. A system macro is a macro that runs on the processor. Let's give this a name. We'll call it Gate Open Event. Click OK. Now, once you create that event, it goes in the list here, okay? Right now, it's showing yes for system macro because I'm about to create one here. Now, what do I want to do to trigger that pop-up? Well, there's lots of ways to do that. One of my favorite ways is to set a flag, which will pop up a layer, okay? Which is a pop-up. Now, what is a flag? A flag is an electronic switch that you could turn on and off in the processor. And there's lots of these you can use for different functions. So my goal is when I turn on that flag switch, that layer will pop up. And when I turn off that flag switch, that layer will go away. And I'll correlate the flag to the gate being open and closed. So the first thing I'm going to do is click that red flag, Edit Flags. And I'm going to give my flag a name. So you want to call it Gate Status. I already named it, but we'll just call this Gate Status for flag 1. Notice you have 256 of these electronic switches you can flip on and off on the processor. And you can do some pretty cool things with them. We have a session coming up on that. Okay? So Gate Status will be our flag name. And I want to turn on that flag. So I'm going to go to my macro steps, select the flag macro step, and double click that. Now you're going to select the flag. And there's 3 things you could do with that little electronic switch. You can set it or turn it on. You can clear it, or AKA turn it off, or you could toggle it from set to clear on or off, okay? Now, out of the box, that flag will be cleared. So let's set it in this case when the gate opens, okay? Now, when that flag is set, I want to program a pop-up on my user interface. So there's a couple of different steps here. So now let's go program the event first. So I'm going to go to my XP6 Click on events. Now I'm going to just double click this event here. So when that gate status goes high or the gate opens, I want to run that event that flips that switch on. Global. Is it a source? No. So skip it and then run the gate open event and click OK. Okay. And now you want to give this a little description. This sets a flag when the gate opens. Okay. Let's go to our user interface. So I'm just going to go to our user interface, start with the home page, and I'm going to create a new layer in our layer window. And this layer is going to be our pop-up. And I'm going to call this Gate Open Alert. Okay? And where it says visible, that means when do you want this pop-up to be visible? Of course, if it's not going to meet that condition, it won't show up. So I want this to be visible as I click the ellipsis and select XP macro flags from the dropdown when that flag gate status I created has been turned on. When that electronic switch or that imaginary switch has been turned on. And then click OK. Okay? And I'll make this a shared layer. And now, whatever I put on this layer will pop up. Let's create something really quick on the layer. I'm going to click my pencil, click my rectangle, and I'm going to draw. Let's go back to selection mode and fine-tune this. Center it. I'll make this inactive. And I'll put some text on here that says gate is opened. Let's make our text a little bit bigger and bolder. Okay, gate's open. Now we could also go to our bitmaps and then put a little gate icon on there as well. It's up to you. Okay? Now you could do other things in this. You could trigger something that pops up a camera feed showing what's at the gate, or show the camera view, or a button to take you to the camera view, or something that goes to the intercom at the gate, whatever you want to do. This is the most basic thing. Now, let's recap what happens. Life is good. The gate is closed. Now someone opens the gate. That voltage goes high. It runs this macro on the processor that triggers the gate open event, which will set that flag gate open, which will pop up the layer on the interface. Now, how do you get rid of this layer? Well, you probably want to go back to your processor and create another event. And it could be that same sensory input, or it could be another one, depending on how the terminals work on the gate. Usually there's an open and closed terminal, but I'll pretend it's all one terminal. And I want to do for gate, when the gate goes low, where there's no voltage, well, I'm going to go create an event now on my processor. Do a gate closed event. Okay, and this does the opposite. If that set the flag, well, this will clear the flag or turn off that switch. Go to our flag, bring it in, make sure clear and the right flag is set. And now, so now when that pops up, as long as when the voltage stops being present when the gate's closed, this will go away on its own. Okay, if that's how you want it to work. Pretty simple to do. So let's recap. A processor event, sense event, occurs when the sense input goes high, meaning there's voltage, or goes low, meaning there's no voltage. And RTI is simply measuring whether voltage exceeds its internal threshold. For example, maybe anything above around 3 to 5 volts counts as high. Okay? And you could trigger whatever macro to run, whether it's on a button already or on a processor, as we just did. Okay? All right, fantastic. And so you want to select this and select the macro, gate closed event, and put a corresponding, oh, we already have one, sorry. You could now delete that and just put clears flag when the gate closes. Okay, let's move on to the next type of event. The next type of event is a periodic event. Now, this event doesn't really have a fixed trigger. This is just going to, well, it does, but it's not usually the same as or clear cut as the sense input. This is just going to run an event or run a macro every X amount of minutes or seconds, whatever you put in the interval. So, for example, if you want a processor to run something every 30 minutes, you could put the macro in here. In my case, I want to use this, and this is popular with residential, commercial installs, not residential, but I want to ensure that if my Sonos stops playing for some reason, that I send a play command to continue playing it. So how do you do that? First, how often do you want to ensure that your Sonos is playing? Well, since I'm going to go and check around every 2 minutes, because that's the typical duration of a song. And if it does stop, well, in 2 minutes it'll start again, but you can do whatever you want. Now, let's not program anything yet. Let's click OK, and let's go to our Sonos player this time. I have 3 of them. I'm going to pick the first one, and now I'm going to click on Macro List. Okay, here are all the macros or the source macros on the Sonos player, and we're going to create our own little routine. Click on the paper, and I'm going to call this Check Sonos. Now I'll do it. I'll say make sure playing. Okay, something simple. Okay, and now I'm going to program a source macro. And what's the source macro going to do? Well, it's going to do a system variable test. It's going to basically check the variable that's coming in from the Sonos, and it's going to check that play status from the Sonos. So it's going to ask the Sonos, so let me go find this, Sonos 1. It's going to say if Sonos 1 is playing, well, I don't want it to do anything, but if it's not playing else, I want to make sure I send a play command. So I'm going to go to my transport functions, play, and pick my Sonos. So let's go back and finish the event. So every 2 minutes, run a check. Sonos is in global. Sonos 1. What macro do I want to run? It's alphabetical order. Make sure playing. Okay? And then what this will do in my description is check every 2 minutes if Sonos is playing. Okay? And if it's not, it'll send a play command or whatever you want, a playlist command or whatever you need to get it back on board. Not a great example, but the periodic event is not really used often as the others. So there you go. All right, let's get to our next event and the most popular one, the daily event. I think you're going to find this one the most useful. This is an event that's going to rely on the astronomical clock to determine if a specific time or X amount of minutes before or after sunrise or sunset occurs. So I want to use this to give my client some peace of mind. Every night, because he forgets to close things at night, sometimes he goes to sleep and he wakes up in a panic because he might have forgot he didn't check to see if the garage door was closed or if the front door was locked or if the security system was armed. So every night at 12:30 on weekdays, he wants to make sure the system is armed. So I'm going to pick the fixed time. And I'm going to plug in the minute column, just enter 30. I'm going to select the PM and just click the letter A. So every night, not every night, but every night at every weekday at 12:30. So pick Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, but let's leave off Friday and Saturday because he might be up a little later than that. Okay? Let's run a particular macro. Now, I don't have the macro left, but this is going to secure his home. Okay, so I'm going to click on global since it's not going to be a specific room. And I'm going to click on macro list. And I'm going to click that piece of paper again. And I'm going to call this secure home. Okay, and now I'm going to do all the things the client might forget to do. First and foremost, I'm going to arm the security. So I'm going to select the security system, and I'm going to arm that security system. Arm home or whatever it does, okay? Second thing I'm going to do is send a relay to make sure my gate is closed, okay? And I'm also going to send another relay to make sure that my garage is closed. Now, I don't have a relay named for it, but I'll just call relay 3, close the garage. And if you want to, you could always put a little comment in there if you don't name the relay that says, this closes garage. That way you know just by looking at it. Maybe if you open this file later, you won't remember what relay 3 is, or just name it, okay? Or you might want to close some lights. You might want to do other things, whatever gives your client the peace of mind that he wants, okay? Now, let's get back to our event. We have to finish programming it. Let's click it. So we have the time, we have the days. Now let's select global. It's not a source, so bypass that field and pick our secure home macro and click OK. And now let's give this a little description. Arm home or secure home weekdays. Now, if you give your client the ability to do it on weekdays, you probably want to give him the ability to do one on weekends. So you create a new one, a sense event, and this one's going to be, sorry, not a sense event, excuse me. Let's cancel that, add new event, daily event. And this one's going to be a little later. Let's do 2 p.m. or 2 a.m., I should say. 2 a.m. And this time, Friday and Saturday. And it's going to do the same exact thing. Okay. And there we go. This secure home weekends. Now, when you're using events, let's do the last one before I explain. Let's create the last event called a startup event. Now, a startup event is going to run when the processor starts up. This is going to run around 30 seconds after it completely starts up. So if you ever sync your processor and it doesn't go right away, give it time because it has to configure all the drivers and completely be start up. It's kind of like an old car, right? It has to get some things done before it can start up. Okay? It has to configure drivers. It has to update all the variable statuses. Then it runs the startup event. Now, why would you want to do that? A lot of times when there's a power outage or when I'm syncing the system, I want to start from a system being off. Now, that makes more sense with when I'm testing a system, but what about a power outage? If you live in an area where you're prone to power outages, your power might be going on and off and on and off. You want to make sure when it comes on your processor that you turn everything off just to make sure that things are off now, so that if things turn off and on again and off and on again from a continued power outage, you don't damage your equipment. So I'm going to run a command here that turns off my specific room. So I'm going to pick my global area and I'm going to pick a macro that corresponds to a room off, okay? So I'm going to pick on, this time I'm going to create it in a room. I'm going to pick my media room. And in the media room macro, there's nothing in here. So let's create a routine. Let's click on our media room, click on macro list, and click on the white piece of paper. And I'm going to call this startup macro. When the processor starts up, I want to make sure everything is off, both when I'm testing and when there's a power outage. Okay? So the first thing I'm going to do, is turn off my projector. That could be a big culprit of power issues. Let's turn that thing off, whatever sequence turns it off. Usually it's a time delay. Let's make this about 1.5 seconds. Something like this. Okay, so we turn off the projector sequence. Okay, let me pull this macro window up. What else do we want to turn off? Well, let's turn off our receiver. AVR, power, let's turn that guy off. Okay, we probably also want to turn off other things. We probably want to turn off other things in our system like our kaleidoscope. Okay, and we'll send a quick power off command. Okay, you get the idea. Okay, and whatever else you want. Now in our event, let's finish it. Click on click on event. And now we're going to pick that event we ran in the media room. Media room, it wasn't on a source, so run that startup macro. And this is going to run 30 seconds after processor starts up. Here we go. Okay? Around 30 seconds, give or take. Okay? And those are the events. Now, there's a couple of things you want to do, number one. Okay? Some of these events are going to happen regardless of the situation. For example, the gate, that's fine if we get the alerts, no big deal, just a pop-up alert. But securing the home on weekdays, that could be a problem. What if for some reason Sunday or Monday is a holiday? Well, one of the weekdays is a holiday and the client's having company or a party or he's just up late. And now at 12:30, that secure home command runs. That could be a huge problem. Okay. So you want to give your client an event control page, something to manage his events. Okay. So I'm going to give my client the ability to turn on and off those events just in case he doesn't want them to run. Okay. Maybe he's going on vacation and he already did all that stuff. Or maybe he is just staying up late. Okay. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to click on the home page. And I already have an area where I'm not using these buttons here, but you could just create a source for this if you want. But I'm just going to create an event control area on my home page. Okay? And I want to do this. I want to make this turn off weekday event. But then you also want to get it back on the rails. Turn on weekday event. And you do want to do the same with the weekend as well. Okay? Now, for this, let's say the client's having company and now it's about 11 o'clock or it's on the same day and he knows he's going to be up late or people are going to be over late. Now, what you want to do is he's going to go up to his screen here and he's going to turn off that weekday event. It's Christmas and it's Wednesday, okay? And that 12:30, that's going to arm the house. Meanwhile, there's people over having, they're hanging out and relaxing or whatever. You want to make sure that that doesn't run. So I'm going to pick my macro level. It doesn't matter what level, depending on how you want to do it, okay? And you're going to use the event control feature. Double click that. And now you can enable, disable, or toggle any event. So I want to turn off my event. So I want to disable my weekday, secure home weekday event. Okay? And of course, now the people leave. Okay? He wants to get it back on the rails. He's got to do it manually tonight, but he wants to get it back on the rails for the following weekday. So this is going to do the opposite. You're going to enable it. Okay? So now the client has some event control. Pretty cool. Now there's one more processor type of event I want to share. It's not in this category, but it's the processor reboot schedule. Okay? And this allows you to reboot your processor So if you click that to turn it on, you could reboot it weekly on a certain day a week at a certain time, or you could reboot it daily at a certain time of day. I don't recommend doing this at a time when people regularly use the system, but if your system is experiencing issues, maybe whatever it's happening, maybe your system gets bogged down because your network isn't so great or whatever else, you can set a reboot schedule. That way, the NIC card isn't affected by broadcast storms or whatever else, and you can reboot your processor. Okay? That's another kind of event you have there. Okay, I'm not going to turn that on. Those are processor events. So let's recap. 4 processor events. Sense events, they either detect if voltage is present from an MPIO port or a sense input. Processors have different numbers of MPIO and sense inputs, so consult the documentation. Periodic events, which run every X amount of minutes or seconds. And these are commonly used to do checks. Maybe someone leaves the garage door open a lot. So when the garage door opens, you can trigger a periodic event or enable a periodic event that says, hey, check to see if the processor is still open every 15 seconds. And if it's 3 minutes later, close it, okay? Or check 3 minutes later, and if not, close it, okay? Then we also have the daily event. Not really daily, but daily events are events that run on a certain day a week or X amount of minutes before or after sunrise or sunset. Want to turn off a specific light or turn on a specific light when the sun goes down? The outdoor lights maybe your patio lights go on at dusk and go off at around 11:30 p.m. or so. Perfect to do. Maybe the outdoor light, or maybe you want to make sure that your lights are on in the morning when outside on your path lights when you're leaving for work or your wife is leaving for work. You got the daily event. Now, the startup event is going to run when it starts up. It's grayed out because you only get to use one of these guys. So put all of your startup events in one single macro. So that startup macro, whatever you do on there, will contain all of the things you want to do when you start up, because the processor will do the same thing every time it starts up anyway. Okay? And those are processor events. You could delete any you want, so you just highlight and click delete event. Easy way to manage your systems. I highly recommend putting these comments in. It makes it much easier to read and access. Okay, let's move on to the next type of event. Driver events. Driver events are contained in drivers. Okay, so let's click on the driver. I have a DoorBird in this system. So under drivers, I'm going to click on my DoorBird. So find your DoorBird, click it, make sure it has a little cogwheel next to it. That means it's a driver. And underneath these other functions, you're going to see where driver info, driver properties, sandwiched in the middle are driver events. And here are all the events that you can run with your DoorBird. Every driver is obviously going to have different events. So for example, when someone rings the doorbell, you can trigger an event. What do you want to do when someone rings the doorbell? Well, the first thing I want to do is maybe I want to send all my controllers. So I'm going to pick my DoorBird. And instead of calling controller, I'm going to make all my controllers jump to the doorbell page when my doorbell rings. Maybe I want to play music or doorbell chime over my speakers. Well, with our RTI 8046-100 or our AC Max 24 audio control device, or AV Pro device, you can use that to trigger chimes. I have an 8046 in my system. So when that doorbell rings, I want to the first thing I want to do is I want to enable Let's go to our zone commands where it says secondary source enable. And I want to enable that secondary source for all the rooms I want. Okay? So you're going to pick the rooms from this list. Right now, there's no rooms because I didn't discover the unit. So you want to pick master bedroom, and you want to do another one for media room. Maybe you want to do 3 of the 4 rooms. And the room names will be hard-coded in here. Okay? Now, then you want to play a chime. What I want to do is I want to secondary source enable, which is going to take all my devices to my BlueTunes, which is source 4. It's a little device that you could use to play chimes that you could pre-record. And I could select a relay command, my BlueTunes relay. By closing the relay on my BlueTunes, that plays a chime. And then I want to do that for about 2 minutes. And then I want to secondary source disable. That'll return all my zones back to whatever they were doing at whatever volume they were at. Okay? So now when the doorbell rings, first of all my controllers will page flip to my DoorBird. My secondary source will enable, and since I designated the BlueTunes as a secondary source for all my zones, the zones that I pick here will jump to the BlueTunes. It'll activate the relay on the BlueTunes to play a chime, and then 2 seconds later, it'll disable those zones so that they return back to what they were doing. Driver event. You could also trigger a driver event when there's motion. So for example, maybe I want to flip another flag. I'll name the second flag or that second switch motion detected. Okay? Then maybe on my processor, on my interface, I'll just trigger a little layer here to pop up called motion detected. Okay? And I'll make that visible when that second flag is detected. Okay? And now I could just, with my little yellow, I'll put some little yellow text in here. Motion detected. Let's make that bold. Let's make it yellow. It's not a big deal. And now it's not obtrusive, but whenever someone walks in front of the door, you'll get that little pop-up. Let's just make sure we complete that by setting that flag. Probably want to do that in the beginning. Okay? And you want to set the right flag. So that is how, you want to do that in the, let's cut this. You want to do that in the motion one. Sorry about that. There you go. So when there's motion, that's a separate event. When there's motion, it will set a flag, which will trigger a little pop-up on my interface. The only thing is you want to be really careful with that so that it clears if motion is not detected. Okay? So you have to do the opposite. Okay? You probably want to set it, wait a few seconds, and then clear it. Okay, that way, and then it'll pop up again after another 2 seconds if someone keeps the motion. Okay, but it'll only pop up 2 seconds in intervals. All right, so let's do another event for another device. My Sonos player. Now, everyone loves the Sonos app, right? Everyone likes to use the Sonos app. And my client wants to be able to use the Sonos app in the backyard. He doesn't want to take his RTI device in the backyard, although he could use a U3. But for his Sonos, he doesn't have a U3, and he doesn't want to take any devices in his backyard. He doesn't want them to get wet. He doesn't want to bring them out because he can't see them well. So what he wants to do is just have his phone, okay? And with his phone, he wants to use the Sonos app. The problem is that the Sonos player is connected to one of the sources on the RTI amp, okay? So how do we make sure that the Sonos can, and you can't turn on the RTI amp from the Sonos app. So how do we make sure the amp is on and set to the right input? Well, where it says Sonos, click on Sonos, and I'm going to click on source event, Sonos driver. I'm going to click on driver events, and I'm going to pick the one that says, let's see, play for player one, or whatever player you want. So player one, play. When he presses play on the Sonos app, or any play for that matter, what it will do is send a command to set the 8046 source selection to Sonos Player 1. And now he doesn't need to tell it. He doesn't need to go inside and turn on the amp and then go outside. Now he could just play his Sonos on his app, and it will automatically turn on the amp to the right input. The amp doesn't have an on. It just has Sonos Player 1. And if you wanted to take it further, you could pause the amp. So what you could do is you could, when he pauses the player, you can turn off the zone. That's up to you, of course. Depends how the client wants things to work. So you can turn off that source selection. Okay? Either option is good, or you can check to see. So what you could do is you could say, you could do a little check after, because if he pauses it for just 2 seconds, maybe he just wants to talk to someone, you could check, you could say in 3 seconds, check to see if Sonos is paused. So let's pick our Sonos. What variable do we want to test? Our transports. Player 1. We want to check to see if Sonos is paused. So after 3 seconds, if Sonos 1 is paused, then you could do the off. Okay? That's up to you. Okay? And there you go. Last event. Lutron systems. We all know that Lutron has keypads. And in my RadioRA 2 house, I have lights in my media room. I have a media room keypad and a few lights, and the keypad controls the scenes in my house. Now, for this keypad, I don't want to just use my Lutron keypad to turn on and off my lights or set my scenes. I want to also use it as a way to control my room. Okay? So what I could do is click on the Lutron driver and click on driver events. And now go to the particular ID that's responsible for your keypad. In that case, ID 2. And you could see LED 1 is scene 1, LED 2 is scene 2, and scene 3, and these correspond to the buttons. So when the LED lights up on scene 1, that means someone pressed the button. So when someone presses that scene 1 button, which is the topmost button, I want to turn on my projector in my media room. Okay? And then I want to wait then I want to turn on my receiver. That way I have a quick way to turn on my room and whatever else you want to do. Okay? For light 2, I want to do a time range test. I want it to do normally what it's supposed to do, and it will do it by just pressing the button, right? But in addition, I wanted to check to see if it's between 7 a.m. and 8 a.m., Monday through Friday, when my wife is getting ready for work. And if it's between those times, I don't just want to invoke that scene. I want to also play music. So when my wife is getting ready for work, Monday through Friday, set between 7 a.m. and 8 a.m., it's going to play some music. So I'm going to take my Sonos, I'm going to select my playlist, and I'm going to select the playlist number my wife wants, number 4, and replace the cue with number 4. Okay? So if it's between those times, it will run that when my wife presses scene 2. And you can do whatever you want with any keypad or even the lights itself. When the light turns on, do this, okay? When the light status is on, do this, and so on, okay? And so you have lighting drivers there. And that's how to do processor and driver events. Now, if you have any questions about driver events, give us a call. We're happy to help you. We're going to take questions next, but I want to thank everyone for participating in the event-based programming. We appreciate it, and hopefully you've learned some powerful features. I'll leave you with one more piece of advice. Clients don't really get excited about a remote control changing favorites, but if you convince them that things can happen passively, that's going to make all the difference in the world, because clients want their house or business to behave intelligently. That means not remembering to press buttons, to do things by schedule or habit, okay? So if it fits the event criteria, it's going to be a perfect way to sell a system. Thanks so much for watching. We'll take questions next.